I'm going to share the screen. Okay, so today's material shouldn't be that important because it's mostly just the administrative things, but I always record the sessions, and so that way you can follow along for demos, homework assignments, and things like that. All right, so we should be recording now, so let's switch over to Brightspace. Okay, so as I said, so this is Brightspace. This is currently spring 2024, and the section is 372.005, so let's go in there. Okay, and then this is basically what it is. Grades are going to appear here. And I've gone over this. So there should be no grades in it. Yeah. Yeah, so there's nobody has grades. Okay. So as I create assignments, etc., they'll start to appear here. Keep in mind, the weights are not there. So at the end of the semester, you have to do your own calculations based on the syllabus. Okay, this is just on an individual basis. You can see your score for that individual assignment, but then look at the syllabus, which is what I'll talk about today. Okay. All right. So all the materials are going to be in content, or I will provide certain links that you should follow. So for instance, all these recordings I just put on YouTube. All right. So you just go to the YouTube channel and everything's going to be there. All right. I don't exactly like provide links, but you can go by the date. Right. So make a note of when you had a class, and then the video is probably loaded that day or the next day. Okay. And it will say like 372 or something like that, and the topic. Okay. So, but you'll need to find them a little bit. All right. So we are recording now. So this is the structure that I usually follow for the materials. I create these modules. Some of them are just a specific topic, like admin just means where the syllabus is going to be, or documents like that. And then after that, once I start the materials, basically every module really represents like a week of work. Okay. So that's kind of the idea. So you can see these are all the module. I've already loaded all the materials. I do change this, add new problems, etc. But in general, this is the structure that I will be following and the topics that we will cover. Okay. So in this section, admin, if I click on it, I think that's where I have the syllabus. So I'll go over the syllabus obviously today, and just discuss that. Then I usually have this project and survey. So basically these are like peer evaluation forms you fill out for your term project. The AVIT surveys that you fill out. This is usually where I will add the assignments link, or the term project link, okay, at the end of the semester, and then, some description for it. Okay. All right. Then resources. This is usually where I like to provide links to outside things. All right. So it makes a lot. So for instance, if we do in this course, we do a lot of scripting, which is a different concept to the programming that maybe you're used to doing with C++, where you have a program and you compile it and you do all of that, right? So here scripting is just meant to be more for prototyping, to be faster. It's meant for automation and to make you very efficient in what you're going to do. We're going to use Python in this course for the most part, maybe a little bit of Bash towards the end of the semester, but those are basically the idea. So Bash has its advantages, but it's a lot more complex to code in Bash. So it makes a little bit more sense to do everything in Python, which is easier. It's got a lot of power, as you will see, hopefully by the end of the semester. And everything that we're going to code in Python is going to be with the goal of system administration. So the task is like, how can I get information about the CPU of the computer, things like that. So you'll see throughout the semester. And then, of course, there's the pure Linux commands, right? So, I need to talk about the Linux environment today. And so, how to set that up. But it should be pretty straightforward. Okay, so anyway, so this is where the resources are. I think I will add later today. I haven't, I guess, done so. The YouTube channel link, so you can find all the videos there that I'll be posting after, all these recordings. The GitHub link will be there. take your time to familiarize yourself with the GitHub, okay? Because all the scripts are there. I usually don't like expect you to just follow along as I'm in class typing a program. Everything's going to be there and it works. I want you, to understand basically what I'm doing. And then if you have a typo, which is very common, you can always go to the GitHub and retrieve the program that works, okay? So all those are already there. But I would suggest that you go to the GitHub and just get a feel for all the programs, all the scripts, and that way you'll know, how to find them and you'll be more familiar with them, basically. All right, so there's going to be a lot of problems that we will do. So sometimes I organize them in folders based on what we're doing. So we will be using, we need Linux, obviously. Most of you have Windows or have a Mac, or maybe you have a Linux machine. It really, in this course, it doesn't matter which Linux you use, as long as you use Linux. Usually Ubuntu is user-friendly, is the most user-friendly Linux version. So I definitely recommend to do that. The VM that we will use is called the Seed VM. It's a Linux machine that's used for cybersecurity courses, but in the end, it's Linux, right? So we can just use that. I mean, we will touch on some cybersecurity related things, obviously, as Linux is about access control for the most part, and that's security. All right, but this is not a cybersecurity class per se. This is just a Linux sysadmin type of a class. So some of the resources will be here. So this says creating VM with VMware. I don't believe we may still have VMware in these computers, but there's issues with the licenses and everything, and we have to pay. So a better solution is to use VirtualBox, which means you don't require a license. You can just download it for free. Maybe you've played with it before. So this is something you'll download for free off the internet. So basically, you won't need this one. This file, PPA2eCaptures, is just a zip file that contains a whole bunch of files that you'll be using throughout the semester. So, I give these reading assignments every now and then, and it's just a reading assignment. Literally, all you have to do is open up Wireshark. So one of the goals with this class is to look at some tools, right? And one of the tools that we do spend a bit of time on is Wireshark. I'm sure you've used Wireshark in some class, but whenever you're using Wireshark, it's for some specific thing. You use it and then you're done with it. So here, this is more of like, let's look at Wireshark from a lot of different ways. Okay, so it's basically just reading materials. You'll do the readings, and then the readings will say something like open Wireshark and load this file. And now click here, click there, and see what happens, okay? So they're gonna be very tutorial-like assignments. All you have to do is kind of do that process and do a one-page summary. We'll talk about that later in the semester when we actually get to it. But for now, just know that the files are located there. And I'll say this again, okay? You only need to download this once to your machine. So these are the zip files. The Seed VM, here's the link for that. So I'll click on this one. Okay, and it should take you to the Seed Security Labs project. So they have a lot of solutions. Currently, the latest version that they have is Ubuntu 2004. So these are distributions of Ubuntu, and they change. So there was 1604 and then 1804. There's 2204, and so on, right? So currently, you don't want to grab one that's too old, but you also don't want to grab the newest one and be the first one to find a bug or a problem and then have to fix it. You kind of want to find one that's somewhere in the middle so that others have found the bug and they provided already the solution online somewhere so that's like the Goldilocks area. All right, so currently, I believe it hasn't been updated, so we're still using 2004. You can download it from here. It's basically, just a file. It'll be a little bit big. Docker is a better solution for virtualization, obviously, because it's a smaller footprint and VMs tend to be a little bit bigger. So that's one of the topics that we will cover in the course. But for now, we'll be using VirtualBox to run the VM. All right, so that's the VM. So we can go back to Go back here to resources. Okay, and then the instructions on how to set up your VM are in this document here. Okay, so I'm going to click on it. So that'll be your first homework assignment. Will be basically just to follow this tutorial. Okay, so you will download that seed VM to your machine and then follow these instructions, and it should be very clear. And then at the end, you should have a working Linux VM. All right, so I would recommend that you try to do that between today and Thursday. I mean, you don't have to submit an assignment or anything like that, but on Thursday, we will start getting into like Linux commands and things like that. So you want to have the VM up and running and working. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's kind of your first task. Okay, get that Linux VM. I'll show you today at some point what it's going to look like, and I'll give you a gist of what it is. I just used the VM that I've used in the past, so it'll look a little bit different in terms of the files that I have in there. But otherwise, it's the same 2004 that you guys have. Seed Ubuntu 2004 is just a Ubuntu 2004 that has a few additional files. Okay, that's basically, and I just like this solution because this is updated, constantly, and so we can just take advantage of that. And also, you will use this VM in some of your cybersecurity courses, so you're already kind of. That's one thing I want to stress, that as you progress in the program, and you start taking a lot of cybersecurity courses, you use Linux a lot. And so this is the class that's supposed to give you that background so that you're comfortable with Linux, basically. So we spent a whole semester just playing with Linux and looking at all the individual topics. Okay, and scripting too. So it's a way for you to get some of your coding going. All right, so let's take a look. So these are the resources. All right, so I've talked about this. So like I said, for Thursday this week, try to have the VM up and running and follow these instructions. All right, so let's go back to the table of contents. I just want to finish up discussing the layout of this. Okay. All right, so that was resources. And then once you're done with these three, you're into this module intro, and that's basically week 1. So this includes the material. So you'll see what I usually do is I'll have like the slides, if we have slides. I'll have a Word document for the homework itself. Like I usually do type this on the terminal. In the very beginning, you got to type some commands basically. So you'll be learning about that. And then this is just a document, but I need to create the assignment link for you to submit the homework. This class does have a lot of homework. Okay, so it definitely has a homework every week. It's not very difficult, I don't think, but you will have a lot of homework assignments basically. Okay. And I usually try to do demos in the class, and I'll record that. So sometimes you can just follow the video and be able to replicate. I will have maybe 1 or 3 problems that are kind of related to what you did that you may have to solve on your own. All right, so as you can see, the first class is what do system administrators do. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to get into Linux, Linux information, basically. All right, then after that, I do, in the second week, which is next week, this is kind of like a review of your scripting skills, okay? So the idea is we're going to do some basic Python scripting, loops, that kind of stuff, if statements, everything, just so that everyone's on the same page, and it doesn't take that long to get caught up with Python, all right? It's a very easy language. There's just like 2 or 3 rules we need to be very aware of, and then after that is super easy. And it's a very powerful language because it has so many modules or libraries that you can import for lots of things, okay? Networking things. There's, for instance, a library called Scapy that is just for networking, like literally for creating packets, for capturing packets. So if you think of Wireshark, for instance, right, which is one of the tools you'll discuss, but Wireshark, you're kind of limited to the GUI interface and what you're doing there. Well, Scapy is like a Python library that allows you to grab the packets, but do things with them through code. All right, so, you know, that's kind of the idea. All right, so we'll cover that towards later in the semester. All right, so yeah, so these are the first 2 weeks. So it's kind of just intro and getting caught up. This will be one of the readings, which I'll discuss later. And then finally, we get into like the first topic, which will be services, okay? So as you can see, these are actually now getting into, if you can imagine a Linux book, right? So it's going to have chapters, and then the chapters are going to be different topics like services, etc. All right, anyway, so that's kind of the layout, as you can see, you know, of which I wanted to give you. All the materials are here. Another resource where I have materials sometimes is this website. I used this a lot during the pandemic because I was able to create this calendar. And so I needed, you know, I wasn't in contact with students that much. So I needed to have a little bit more structured thing. I think I'm going to bring this back this year. We'll see. All right. So here I have also additional links to the course. These are the textbooks that I have used to develop the materials. You're not required to buy these books. You don't have to buy them. I provide all the materials and the GitHub, etc. But I mean, some people like books. So, all right. So I'm Professor Calix. My office is Anderson 241. Office hours. It's probably I need to change this. It's going to be Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 to 4. So just before this class, Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's kind of my office hours. I already talked about the VM. Yeah, the YouTube channel. So hopefully that's the link to the YouTube channel. So you can, that's where I'll post the videos, as I said. This is the GitHub, I believe. Yep. So if you notice, it's going to take, it says Unix and Python scripting. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. So these are a lot of the topics that we will cover, you know, and then these are some of the scripts that we will do, and these include scripts or commands. All right, so you're going to find a combination of scripts, commands, etc., to be able to accomplish a task. So the problems might be like configure the Linux firewall, right? But you want to write a script to enter rules, etc., you know, that kind of thing. You know, the commands for Git, which is like GitHub, has to do with, you know, when you write code, right? So you want to store it on, you know, share the code files and keep track of changes if you're collaborating in a project. So that involves commands. Conda, for instance, is Anaconda. This is something that you guys will learn about, is about having different environments basically for development, right? So you have a environment where you use Java 2, but then you have another project that uses Java 1. And what do you do now? Do you remove the old installation of Java? Or you can use environments where you can have one environment with Java 1 and it works fine, and then another environment with Java 2 and it works perfectly fine. So anyway, so these are some of the ideas that we will cover in the semester. Okay. Anyway, so that's the GitHub. So I think we can go back. These again are just links. Over the years, I get a lot of questions, you know, and so every time I get a question that I'm getting every semester, or I'm getting from the same, you know, from the same question from different students, so I end up adding that as here as a fact almost, right? So frequently asked questions. So it's some, you know, links, things like that. And then it's kind of the calendar, which I haven't updated it yet, but I think I will be using it this semester. All right. So anyway, these are all the resources. So let's go to the back to Brightspace here. And now let's get into the syllabus, which you know, it's like the last administrative thing that we need to look at before we actually start getting into the course materials. All right, so you can click on the syllabus here. Okay, so there's the syllabus. So this is, as I said, ITS 374, System Administration and Management. I'm Professor Calix. I'm in Anderson 241, and you know, you'll submit your homework assignments on Brightspace. Yeah, I already mentioned the books. None of them are required. I mean, I like in particular this one, Essential System Administration. But I mean, I will provide all the materials. So, this is a Linux course, so we'll cover basically as much as I can of Linux within a semester. Linux is a very large topic, but we'll start with the basics and build up on that. Okay, so these are some of the topics. You can see them there listed out. All right, grading and assessment. So as you can see, this class has a lot of assignments. 50% of your grade is basically just doing the assignment. So my recommendation to you is do not miss homework, okay? That's really what's going to affect you. Sometimes students are very good at just coming to class and listening and retaining the material, and they do really great on the exams. But if you look and they think that if they just do well on the exams, they'll pass. If you look at the grade distribution, exams are only 30% of your grade. So really what you have to pay attention to is doing the lab assignments. All right, so that's 50% for labs, 30% for exams. There's a project that's 10%, or it may be 2 mini projects like project A, project B, just depends. That's 10% of your grade. So this is a 300 level class and the project is not that big, okay? And then there's 10% that I provide for either quizzes, teamwork, participation, that kind of thing. So it could be as easily as just coming to class and you get 10% of your grade, okay? All right, any questions about the grading and assessment criteria? Oh, all right, great. Right, then there's some information that we have to put on this. In particular, homework is what's really important for me. Please do not email me homework assignments. Okay, in general, you need to submit your homework on Brightspace. Okay, so the way it's going to work is on Thursday we do a homework assignment, and then it's due a week from Thursday. All right, or it might be due the Sunday of the following week. So you at least get a week, or maybe a little bit more, like 10 days until the end of the weekend. Okay. Yeah, so all this with the assignment is there. All of that is, university policies and procedures that we have to include. So read through the syllabus. That's my recommendation. Read it. All right, and then we have, this is the different modules that we will cover throughout the semester. Okay, so that's your syllabus. Any questions about the syllabus? All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at some slides, and we're going to look at what a lab looks like, what you should submit for a lab assignment, basically, and then we'll get a look at the VM also and how that works, okay? The VM will become the thing that you use all semester. It's like your tool will be that VM, your Linux environment. So it's really important. Okay, so let's go to table of contents. So we are now at this point done with all the resource, everything, basically all administrative things. Yep. And so now we are ready for the topics, all right? First week topics. So this is a manual for the VM, okay? So it's basically like a PDF with instructions about the VM. So for instance, the VM comes with a user account. If you forget it, it's going to be there. The password is also there. I'll demo that in a second, but there's some information in there about the virtual machine, not about Linux per se, but just about the VM itself that you might want to take a look at. All right, then after that, this is just an intro. There's not really that much important information, but it's just what are, some system administration tasks, some things like that. All right, and then this is a, basically, usually, this is a Word document, right? So it's gonna be the instructions on what to do for the homework assignment. And then there's going to be a link for the assignment. Currently, what I have is just a description. I haven't actually created the link yet, okay? But let's take a look at that. So you can see here it says, from the attached Word document, right? That's the instructions, complete bullets 1 through 26. Submit a report with screenshots for each problem and answer the questions. So you'll encounter questions. A lot of this is running a command and getting the output and explaining what that means or what that does, especially in the very beginning, since we're assuming we're starting from zero on Linux, we're covering everything. Okay, we're starting from the very beginning, if you will. All right, so that's kind of what the homework assignment description will look like. I usually just copy this, put it in the assignment, and then I might modify it a little bit. Okay. So then you'll have a Word document that is attached, and that's, for instance, this one. And they don't all look the same, but in general, I like to number them like this, so it's easy for you to tell me I'm having an issue with bullet 17 or something like that. All right, so this is kind of the very beginning. So you'll start up your VM. You can see that I've loaded here the username and the password. Wherever you see VM workstation in these, just now we've changed to VirtualBox. But they're very similar. All right, so when you log in, I'll demo this in a little bit. The username will be seed, okay, and then the password is just these, which is inverted of seed. All right, after that, the first thing we're going to want to do after we set up the machine is we're going to check for internet connectivity. So because sometimes you'll need to install programs, so we're going to learn how to do that in Linux, which is very straightforward, especially if you're doing Ubuntu. So you'll download some program. You want to make sure that you can download that it's connected to the internet. Sometimes you'll need to go to Brightspace and download files from Brightspace, or you need to open an email, or etc. So you need to have internet access. We'll be using the terminal, so this is a good chance. Sometimes in this class, I get a mix of students. So some are like Linux experts, right? So they've been doing Linux since they were in the 3rd grade or something, and sometimes I get students that just have used Windows all their life. And so it's a different, when you're coming from Windows, you're used to certain things, point and click, those kinds of things, GUI, wizards, things like that. And Linux is a little bit different than that. So there's basically they might be a little bit scared, but don't be. I mean, it's a powerful tool. And my goal and my interest is that by the end of the class, you'll appreciate Linux a lot, and you'll think, wow, what a powerful tool this is. Okay. So so that's kind of the idea. So Linux actually comes from Unix. I don't go into history or anything like that, but basically there's like a kernel, which is the basic operating system, and then from there they build all these distributions of Linux. Okay, so we won't get into all those details. We're just using Linux Ubuntu with the goal of knowing commands, which are very common across platforms, etc. Sometimes the file structure is a little bit different, but in general, it's very similar as well. So that's one thing that we have to understand. So we have a topic called the Unix way, which basically is like the philosophy of Linux. So when these people, the people that created Unix, we're thinking about developing this operating system, they were like, okay, there's got to be this, we have to have a theme or a philosophy of what we need, and they were very practical about it. Okay, basically the philosophy in Linux or Unix, and also I should say, I always say Linux because I default to that. Sometimes I'm just talking about Unix in general, but the VM is all Linux Ubuntu. But yeah, the philosophy is basically that everything is a file. Like everything is a file. Okay, even a directory is a file. Everything's a file. And so that's kind of, we build on that, and then access control. So there's like permissions and users, and we'll spend quite a bit of time on that because it's really important. And usually whenever you have a problem in Linux that something doesn't work, it's an access control issue. Some permission or something is blocking what you want to do. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. As you can see here, I have some commands, sudo, nano. These are like very basic commands. I can honestly tell you there's like a handful of commands that you will use every time that you're in this system. Okay, so these you'll use them. I suggest maybe create your own GitHub and put in that GitHub, call it like my Unix class, and then put important commands there so you can reference them, and that way you'll become more efficient with what you're doing. We'll learn how to install things. So you can see basically the first lab this week will just be this, going through these. So in general, you'll go in and, what is sudo, right? So I'll demo this at some point and we'll talk about what it is. And this is actually important, all right? Has to do with access control and security, right? And then nano, what is nano, right? So everybody's, if you've used Linux before, you may have a favorite editor that's not nano. Do any of you have that? Do you have like when you've used Linux in the past, what editor have you used other than nano? Just nano. All right, there you go. So we used to get students that have used something called VI or something like that, and they just love that, right? But in general, I use nano. It's just I like it. It's my preference. So that's what what I'll show you. We'll talk about installation here. ls, this is a command that you will use a lot. So a lot of the time, one big problem with students in the beginning is they don't know where they put their file. It's like, okay, where's my file? They do all the work and it's there, it ran, but now you can't find it, right? Because you don't understand the structure of the file system and you don't know how to get around it, right? So that's one of the things. It's like we have to learn how to navigate through the file system, how to go deep into it, go back up. It's a tree. So that's the way that you should think of the file system, right? It's a tree. And so there's one tree and everything goes into that tree. Even new devices like a new drive or something gets attached to the tree. Okay, so we'll talk about that. And I have slides for all of these topics, obviously. All right, so we'll go over these commands. As you can see here, I'll do like some of these, like maybe half of these, and I'll talk about them because it's the first class, and then you guys will can finish out the rest. Okay. Now, what do you need to submit, right? So what do you need to submit? You can take this Word document, or you can create your own Word document, and basically just put in the problem in there. What are you doing? So I'm doing this bullet 11, right? So file partition. So what is it? Okay, df space -h. Okay, what does that do? It actually gives you the hard drives, right? And it tells you, like, how you guys have a computer and maybe you get 250 gigabytes and you download a lot of movies and things like that. So at some point you want to know how much space you have available. You see what I'm saying? That's what this is for. Okay, so maybe it turns out that you've been downloaded so many movies, you only have like 5 gigs left. So what you have to do, you have to move your files somewhere else, okay, to free up space. So that's kind of what this command is for, okay? And so we'll go over that. Later on, you'll get some complex problems about, I might say how much space is this group or this user using, and then you have to write a script that gives you that information. So it gets a little bit more challenging. But at the end of the day, what we're using is basically a combination of commands, right, to solve some problem. That's it. All right. And they're all problems related to the operating system, etc. Okay. So yeah, so these are, as I said, these are just some commands. That was just an example. Students always get stuck on this one. There's no commands here. Instead, there are some parts of the operating system where it makes more sense just to use the GUI interface, right? And this is one of them. Just to check the network connection. So remind me to demo this bullet 18 at some point, just so that you know what I mean. But it's important to be able to look at, your connections and everything. We will do a lab just on DNS, so this is just an introduction. These are some of the commands that you will need for that. Okay, there's Python, obviously, there it is. So Python should already be installed on your VM, especially we'll install Anaconda, and when we talk about environments, I'll try to do that early on in the semester, and just so, we'll have Python for a lot of our scripting. If you don't have Anaconda installed, you have to type like Python 3, I think, instead, okay, on this VM. So that's something that I sometimes forget to mention, but just be aware of it now. But once you have Anaconda installed, then, you know, we're all going to be on the, we'll have the same environment basically. All right, and yeah, so that's your first lab for this week. Oh, okay. I don't know why I did that. Sometimes this, yeah, there it is. Sorry. Okay, so this is the lab, okay, that you will have this week. Okay, so basically, you have 2 tasks this week to get that VM from the seed website, download it, then follow those instructions that I gave you, set it up as a virtual machine, and then you will run through these commands, take screenshots, create a report. So that's an important thing. So when you do any of these commands, please provide a screenshot and a comment, just 1 or 2 sentences, right, of what it is, what it's doing. So for these first few weeks, we're just running commands. Later on, it's going to be more like, here's a problem, solve it, right, with this aspect. Not everything needs to be Python, because you can actually code on the terminal. And that's one of the things that I'll show you is how you can do things like redirection, grep and awk, etc. So there's actually commands, and the way that the terminal works is that you think of it as a pipe, right? It's a pipe of things. And so you can think of it as, I'm going to insert this command, and then I'm going to throw an input to this command, and the command will give me an output, and then I can take that output and redirect it to another command, and so on. And you can build this pipe of commands, of inputs and outputs going from one to the other. So you can actually code on the terminal, is what I'm saying. And as it turns out, sometimes using functions in the terminal is better or is preferred than using functions in Python. Python is not necessarily the fastest language because it's meant to be for prototyping. It's extremely powerful. Whereas if you're using a command in the Linux kernel, it is extremely fast and efficient. So sometimes if you have a really large task, like sorting a lot of data, we'll do that at some point, you can just do it with a command on the terminal, okay? So those are things that we're going to learn to understand what they mean. All right, so any questions on what you need to do for the homework for submissions? Right, so you run the commands on Linux, take screenshots, make comments, and you can just create a Word document, convert it to PDF, something like that, and you will submit that report on the assignment link once I add it. I usually create the assignment links on Thursday when I do the lab. So at that point, I'll create the link, I'll do the demo, and then give you guys some time to work on the homework. Any questions so far? All right, great. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to go back to, where are we? We're on the Brightspace. Yeah, well, let's go back to Brightspace. Okay. I don't usually spend too much time. What you'll notice is that every module in general will have some slides, okay? And these slides will have a combination of things that are related to sysadmin tasks. Sometimes they're more like theoretical. And then there's going to have also like the Linux definitions and descriptions. You know, what is this? What is that? You know, what is sudo or something? I don't usually spend too much time on the slides. I usually just like to go on, on the Linux environment and do things. So my suggestion to you is read the slides always. Okay, you can read them before the class or after, but just don't forget to read the slides. Okay, they're almost like meant for you to be reading. They're very easy to just read and understand. There's nothing complicated there. And they basically come from one of the books, and I've just taken a lot of the concepts and summarized them into these slides, so it's not that much reading for you. So the important things should be in here, okay? So I'm going to just show you one of these, the very beginning one, and then we'll just start playing with Linux, okay? So I think it's opening. It's just a standard PowerPoint. Okay. Oh, this happens sometimes with this. We're still recording. I think I'm going to share again. So hopefully, I think it's sharing. All right. Okay. Give me a sec. All right. So hopefully this is working. All right. So yeah, so I'll just quickly go through these. As I said, they just provide definitions of a lot of the concepts or the commands sometimes. Yeah, so that's, basically they just go over what do system administrators do, right? So sysadmin. So basically it takes a broader look than just Linux to basically like the IT practice, okay, in general. So it's just going to have, as you can see, a lot of very like administrative or managerial concepts. So you have to think about organizational structure, business priorities, things like that. So that, I don't want to bore you with that. So what I suggest is just read through this. There could be some questions on the exam related to these things. So definitely read it, okay? And if you have questions, ask them, but they're basically just meant for you to be reading material. Okay, so go through them, some of the tasks, replacing services, which means replacing servers, configurations, things like that. And then just talks about different ideas, whether you have a big IT practice or a small IT practice. Okay, so definitely read through these. Okay. Yeah, it talks about consider turnover in the system admin practice where a lot of employees come and go. So anyway, this is just meant for you to read. All right. One thing I want to show you is, do you guys know who these guys are? Have you ever seen them? Everyone knows Steve Jobs. You guys know Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, important people. But these are actually important people too. That's Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. So they were like the people who created the original Unix, the Unix operating system. Okay. So at Bell Labs, or is it IBM? I can't remember exactly. But they're basically started and they created the ideas, the original concepts of the Unix operating system. Questions? Yeah, so you can, just a little bit of history there. Definitely Google them. I'm sure they have Wikipedia pages and look at everything that they did. And it's very interesting stories. So everyone knows, of course, there's Unix. And then do you guys know who created Linux, the Linux kernel? No, you guys don't know that name. Linus Torvalds, right? Yeah. And he's still alive today. So yeah, that's it. And that's where the name Linux, right? Linus. So anyway, you can also Google him and just get a feel for their history, which is really interesting. Okay. All right. So anyway, that's kind of read through these slides. Basically, I won't usually go into the slides, but definitely read through them. All right. So let me make sure this is still working. Let me actually, just in case this thing broke, I'm going to start a new one, kind of. So let me see. I'm going to do this.